teacher since 2005. I graduated from the University of Ottawa. I've worked for 4 school boards, the Ottawa, Carleton and Catholic, as well as here in Kingston, the Catholic and Public Board. I supply taught for about 5 years, taking different long-term occasional positions during that time. And it took me about 3 years to get in with Limestone. I kicked off with the Right to Read program, which helped me. My credentials also helped me get into the board. So my first chunk of a contract was a half-time contract out at a country school. I was able to add a quarter time to 75%, and the next year I was lucky enough to consolidate between 2 different schools to make a full-time job. Frameworks that I work from that helps keep me anchored when you might even be nervous in an interview is a framework that I've come up with a colleague of mine that works really well. So the first step that you take, say you're asked, what is your entrance plan into a position? So you would do your pre, which would be your homework phase. What are you going to know before you come into the position? You know, your curriculum, the OSRs, making sure that you do your teacher homework, get all that background knowledge about your students. The second step after the pre is your class. How are you setting up your class? How does this impact your class? So talking about your classroom environment, what are the expectations? How would you let the students know that? Anything that your students would need to know and what that question impacts on your students. The next part we go to would be the school as a whole. So on an entrance question, you might say things like, you know, what are the emergency plans? Do I know my staff handbook? Do I know who all of the people and important people in the building are? Do I know who I would make connections with if I had a trouble with a student who is struggling? The next level that we go to is the greater community. So in an entrance plan, you need to know the community that is your school. Where is this school in the community? How do you get in contact with parents? How do you stay connected to the outer community? And then the last level of the framework is your reflection. So basically you would say all of these pieces are really important in my entrance plan to ensure that I'm a successful teacher. Advice that I would give you is to always be prepared. Do your best, because you never know when the most important person that's going to get you a job is watching and paying attention. You are in a field with a lot of really great people and you need to shine above all of those other people. My advice around interviews would be to know what's going on in the environment around you, especially the school boards you're working for. Try to team up with someone that you trust. Learn from other colleagues, talk to them, maybe even like pre-study when you're doing an interview, because sometimes other people can give you a better perspective that you might not think of on your own. It just makes you a stronger candidate. The positives of coming into teaching is that if you can land yourself a supply job, it's where most people start out, you get to see lots of different environments, you work with different children, you pick up different strategies that work, you get to see different classrooms and what teachers have done, and it builds your repertoire. Different jobs that you might get, you might work with different exceptionalities, different grade levels. Those are all things you can put into your teacher toolbox, is what I like to call it. I would say some of the minuses of working sort of as a supply teacher or trying to get a position is that it can last for a really long time, and that makes it hard sometimes financially if you're trying to land a permanent position, something that you can hold on to. So sometimes you have to work a secondary job, which works as well.
So the interview process starts with trying to get a supply teaching position. For that interview, I had to prepare a presentation. I had 5 interview questions and I had to do a written piece for it. And there's 3 principals that are going to interview you for that start. From there, after 8 months of supply teaching and a certain amount of days, you can interview for the LTO list if it becomes available. And again, that was an interview with a presentation question that they email you a week before, 5 questions in front of the panel, and a written component. And that was 2 principals that interviewed me for that. And once you're on the LTO list, you can apply for individual LTOs and you'll be interviewed by principals and vice principals. That often looks like a presentation and an interview question, or it could include the interview questions and a written component. My best advice for that would be to prepare for your interviews and practice your questions, answers over and over and over again, to really put your effort into your presentations, asking for advice and support as you need it. I have talked to many of my friends that are teachers and tried to get some input on what I'm doing well. Always ask for feedback after an interview. Even if you don't get a position, the principals will provide you feedback on what you can improve on. And work hard in all your positions. You never know who's going to be hiring you in the future, and principals and vice principals do notice who works hard and who is very dedicated to teaching.
Try not to get discouraged. There are moments where you are going to feel like you have had 10 interviews within the last 3 years, and it gets frustrating. And keep working on it, plug away until you get your position. Take supply teaching as the best opportunity to hone in on your classroom management skills.